Welcome to Catholic Conversations. This is your host, Adrian Fonseca. And today I'll be interviewing Dr. Carol Delaney, who is a professor at Stanford University. She also wrote the book Columbus and the Quest for Jerusalem, and that's what we can talk about today. She got her undergraduate degree from Boston University, her master's in theology from Harvard, or master's in divinity or theology and divinity from Harvard, and she had her PhD in cultural anthropology from the University of Chicago. And so I'll be interviewing her today, talking about Columbus and the quest for Jerusalem, and that is our topic for today. And I'm going to show you. This is her book right here. This I highly recommend it. If you're watching this, if you're listening to it, then you can't see it. But if you're watching it, you can see the book over here to my, I guess, my right. And this is I highly recommend the book. It's a wonderful read. It's a pretty easy read too. But you also, it's a not small, but it is an easy read. And it covers a lot of information about the life of Christopher Columbus, about the context that he lived in. So I highly recommend the book. And also, we're going to be talking a little bit about the whole situation of toppling statues of Christopher Columbus. We have seen his head being beheaded across the U.S. In Houston, we had his hand cut off. And we also have seen that him being vandalized, where he's covered in red paint and labeled a genocidal maniac. And so this fight to get rid of Columbus and to banish Columbus from history is just rampant across America today. And so we're going to be talking about all these things and more with Carol Delaney. And so we're just talking about how Christopher Columbus he was a holy man, and so many people that he was surrounded by were not as holy as he was. They were not saintly men. He was surrounded by a lot of Spanish soldiers who were not exactly the same kind of people that Christopher Columbus was. And if Christopher Columbus was guilty of anything, he was guilty of being too trusting of the Spanish people, of the Spanish not Spanish people, but the Spanish soldiers. He was on a quest to do great things, and sometimes things fail, and he failed in terms of protecting the natives as he would have liked. But Christopher Columbus himself was a great man, a holy man. He was a Franciscan friar. All these great things about Christopher Columbus that are never mentioned. And so we're going to be talking about that today. I've asked her a lot of questions. And if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, then you should let me know. And I will send those questions to her. She's very good at responding to the email. And so I'm going to throw you into the interview right now.
I think I'm going to have to go back and read my book because it's been a while back since I wrote it. Anyway.
I think it was 2011, correct? Is that right?
Yeah. It's a while back, and the research was done even before that.
Yikes.
But yes, I trained as an anthropologist. I'm long retired now, but and my other work was in Turkey, in a little village in the middle of Turkey. But anthropologists, I guess the one thing about anthropologists is that they have to learn what the people, how they think, their language, of course, and what the context is. And so to get back into 15th century Europe, I had to read a lot of stuff that I had never even read before to find out what was going on in 15th century Europe for the context for Columbus. And I also have a degree from Harvard Divinity School. I'm not religious. I've written another book that's very critical, but I certainly know a lot about it because I had studied religion at the Harvard Divinity School before I became an anthropologist. So that was very helpful.
Absolutely. And you said that you, in your book, you mentioned how you went to modern day Genoa, where we believe that Christopher Columbus is from originally. Could you tell me about that a little bit? Like, why go there to study someone so long ago? Immediately when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, isn't it like just so radically different from then that it's almost like not worth going? So why is it that you went, and what did you learn from going?
Yes, I did want to go, and it's pronounced Genoa, I think.
Oh, Genoa.
Genoa. And well, I wanted to see the context. There's also his house is there, his old house. and it's been preserved. There's archives, even though I can't really read them, but I could talk to people there. And I did talk to a lot of people in Genoa about it, but it also gave me a context of, just where it was situated, I guess. I don't know. I liked it a lot. It's a very small little city. Yeah, I don't know. I also at one point met one of his descendants.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how
Talked to
was
her
that?
a little bit. I think I met her here, but I can't remember. I might have said something about it in the book. I don't remember.
Well, that's very interesting. And then
I talked to a lot of people, who had done research and in Genoa, in the archives and in his house, and and just seeing the way things were set up, to see a house that he lived in. And
I think you mentioned how being there you could see like the sea, and just seeing how he would have been able to go outside and see the vastness of the water.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, kind of way to grow up. And in his context when he lived in, often people and I think this kind of myth has gone away at this point, where people say that, he sailed the ocean blue to prove the world was round.
No.
But right. So I think that myth has completely been, I don't hear many people claim that anymore. But I definitely learned that back when I was in elementary school.
Good.
But what was the historical context of the scientific world at that point? What did he know? What did he not know?
About what? The world?
About sailing, about the world,
Well, he was a sailor, so he learned sailing, I guess, in Genoa. It's a little hard for me to remember all of this stuff now. And he knew he couldn't go the eastern route because, that had been divided up, given away to the Portuguese. He had actually sailed for the Portuguese into the Atlantic at least once and down, but he couldn't sail he didn't want to sail for them, or maybe couldn't sail for them on this voyage. But he knew, something about the coastline on the other side of, away from Genoa, on the Atlantic side. And so he just thought, well, I'll go across that ocean, instead of trying to go. He couldn't go the other way. So the only way he could have gone was across the Atlantic.
That's very interesting. And so you also talk about how he went that direction with the hopes of bringing, and I think if I understand this correctly, he was asked, or the Spanish crown was asked to send friars and priests over to the Grand Khan in order to convert the nation to help them on the crusade. Is that correct?
I don't know about the whole crusade business. And when he went over, he wanted to meet the Grand Khan to set up a trading post.
Right.
And the money like Marco Polo had done. He knew all about Marco Polo. He'd read Marco Polo's stuff. To set up a trading post. And the profit from that was to be used to finance the crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims.
And so what was Christopher Columbus?
It was not to convert the Grand Khan or anything like that.
Okay, so it was not for that.
No. It was to get the money with the Grand Khan and then use that money, bring it back to Genoa, and then finance a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims before the end of the world, because it was in Muslim hands. It had to be in Christian hands so that the temple could be rebuilt and Christ could come again to save everybody.
So you talked about how your background was in millennial studies, which I'm not 100% sure what that meant exactly, because you were talking about how the Christopher Columbus was talking about the end times during his life, and that's how you first got interested in him. And could you speak about that a little bit? Like, what was his idea about the end of the world coming?
Well, apparently, I was teaching that class in Millennial Fever at the turn of the millennium, 1999. And people in the United States, as well in the world, I think, were very concerned about what's going to happen, Y2K, the planes are going to crash, everything's going to go haywire. In Columbus's time, there had already been the Black Death that had taken like 50 million people. They were all dead, and some of them were in Genoa and other places. And so he knew that things were really bad. And he felt like, and I guess lots of people did feel like, oh my God, maybe the world is going to come to an end soon. And later, he even figured out how many years were left. I don't think he did that originally. Maybe he was thinking about it, but he did eventually figure out how many years were left. And he wrote that down twice. He also wrote a book of prophecies that he gathered from the Bible and from other sources, talking about the end of the world.
That's very interesting. Did he? Do we have those writings in
Oh,
in
yes.
English?
Oh, yeah, they're published. You can read it.
Literally interesting. I'm very curious.
People don't
Yeah.
even know he has all these written things. I mean, there's his diary. That's available. The Book of Prophecies is available. His son, Ferdinand, wrote a biography of his father. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff out there.
That's very interesting. And I'm sure you're familiar with the term nomen est omen, which is the name is a sign. And so the kind of the idea that your name is going to is part of who you are. It like directs you. So if your name is Blackman, then you're a blacksmith, that kind of thing.
Right.
Or right, that kind of idea.
Christopher means the Christ bearer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And he definitely saw himself in that way. Maybe not originally, but after the voyage, I think he definitely thought of himself that way. And the other thing is, I think there was one priest who was horrible that was on the first voyage, never did anything much. He kept asking Queen Isabella to send more priests so they could teach the people about Christianity and baptize them, because baptized people could not be enslaved. And she never sent any more.
Really?
No.
Is that, wow.
Or if she sent any, he never mentioned them, but the only ones I ever heard about was the one at the beginning, maybe another one, but he wanted lots more to be sent, and he kept writing to her saying, please send some more. And he also kept writing to her to send miners, because he had no intentions of having the natives be the miners at the mine, at the gold mine. And she never sent any miners.
That's very interesting. So what did they end up doing? Did they end up having to enslave the natives, or how did that end up playing out?
Well, she did send on the second voyage, she sent over 17 ships and, over 1,000 men. And he's the one person who's in charge. And eventually they did find the gold, and but the sailors refused to do the mining.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was the natives who became the miners. And of course, they didn't really know anything about it. And so they had to be instructed and so forth. But, had she sent real miners, it would have been much easier, and it would have happened much quicker, and everything would have been quite different.
And even so, of employing the natives to do that work, I believe you mentioned how they had that Christopher Columbus required them to be paid as employees of the crown. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so
whether they were or not, I don't know, or how they were paid. But and then she sent over those two horrible men. One was Roldan, the other one was Bobadilla. And they were just awful. And in fact, they captured Columbus, and I guess you may not have gotten there, and put him on chains and sent him back to Spain on the third voyage.
Right. And so what ended up happening with that? Because I hear often people take that as proof that Christopher Columbus was an evil man.
No, the other two were the evil guys. They were horrible. Oh, Bobadilla and Roldan, they were just awful.
So what exactly happened in that situation?
What?
So what exactly happened in that situation?
I think that they were the ones that were, doing a lot of the marauding, raping, going around against his orders. Like on the first voyage, when he had to leave the men, he left strict orders. He was friendly with the chief there, Guacanagari, very, very friendly. And he remained friends with him throughout. But so Columbus left very strict orders. Do not go marauding, do not go raping, do not do this. But of course, that's exactly what they did.
Right. I think
when he got back, they were all dead, and he did not blame Guacanagari. but believed him, and when he told him that what they had done. But the guys
Wow.
who came with him didn't believe that. They wanted to kill Guacanagari, and Columbus said, no, 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 so that it became a very contentious
Mm.
situation, I
Right.
think.
On page 109 of your book, you mention a quote here is from Columbus saying, before he left, avoid doing injury or using violence to the women, by which they would cause scandal and set a bad example. Rather, they should
Right.
strive and watch by their soft and honest speech to gain their goodwill, keeping their friendship and love, so that he should find them as friendly and favorable, and more so when he returned.
That's right. Mhm.
And so it just seems like the accusation against him to be, because I also heard, I think it was from the Huffington Post, they put an article saying that he was involved in trading underage women
Oh,
and sex slavery.
no way.
Right.
Absolutely
And I
no
was
way.
absolutely
Oh,
blown away by that. I was like, wow. I
maybe
mean,
some of his men did that. Maybe some of those men did that, but that was not anything that he did. Absolutely not. Oh,
and where do you think these accusations towards
I
Columbus
don't
come from?
know. That's just crazy. I mean, the other quote I wanted to read was the one where he said, I think I've got it here. Okay, 106, where Columbus says, I believe that in the world there are no better people or a better land. They love their neighbors as themselves, and they have the sweetest speech in the world, and they're gentle and always laughing. And he assumed that they were natural Christians. All they needed was a bit of instructions.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
To like that, to especially with the mindset time, you wouldn't think that that he would just say that they're natural Christians. And that, what are the chances of him being there with
right.
these peaceful Native Americans, especially considering he later ran into what are they? What are they?
The Caribs,
The Caribs,
the
the
Caribs,
Caribs,
yeah.
and it's very interesting to make the comparison between the Caribs and then
Yeah,
the community that he ran into originally.
right.
Um,
And also that he helped his friends um, against the Caribs. And the Caribs had come and abducted a couple of people, and he went and got them and brought them back. And, so he was very friendly, and he remained, as far as I know, he remained friendly with the ones that he had first come in contact with.
Well, the other accusation against him was that he took Native Americans back to the New World as slaves, six of them, at the beginning of his voyage, his first trip there. And they
They
say
were not, they wanted to go, those six. And also this was after the Santa Maria had gone aground, so he had to go back and get another ship. And so he left 39 or 40 men, something like that, behind. Those strict instructions, don't do all this stuff. Yes, he took six back. He said more wanted to go. They'd all been on the ships, and looking around. And those six were all baptized at court. Baptized people cannot be enslaved.
hmm,
Two of them were decided to stay at the court. One became Columbus's godson and traveled with him on his other voyages.
oh, wow.
And two of them, so that's 2, 3. Well, two of them then, 2 or 3 went back. Let me, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, a couple of them went back, but one of them died at sea on the return voyage. But otherwise, the other two got back there.
That's very interesting. And one of them was the son of the chieftain. Is that correct?
Yes,
And so they.
That's the one that became his godson.
Oh, okay. So.
That's the one.
Oh,
that became
wow.
his
So
godson.
that really shows the friendship between
Yeah.
the chieftain and Columbus.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if it was Guacanagari's son, but it was some chief's son. I'm not sure that the name of that chief was ever mentioned. And the fact that also that Columbus was learning the language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately he was probably able to speak, fairly well, at least with Guacanagari's group.
That's pretty
and
amazing.
He said that people in his household should learn the language, but I don't think anybody ever besides him did. Maybe.
It's pretty amazing to see how he would go and learn this totally new language from scratch.
Yeah.
Like that, me trying to just learn basic Latin is like
right.
drilling holes in my head. So
well,
to
I
see
think
him
he probably
do
assumed that learning the language would be one way to communicate a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes
Absolutely.
total sense.
Right.
It
And
was sort
so,
of like an anthropologist.
oh, that's interesting that you say that because um, I think you had mentioned that in your lecture. I was listening to your. I'm going to link in whenever I post this to your lecture you gave at what university did you give the lecture on? That's on YouTube now.
Oh my
I
goodness, I
have to
don't
go
know.
look. It was a number of years ago. It was back in like 2011, I think, or 12 ish,
Huh,
a number of years ago.
I don't know where it was.
But the in the lecture you had talked about how Christopher Columbus was kind of like a anthropologist, where he got there and really was able to understand the people in which he was living with.
Yeah,
And I thought that was very interesting because we kind of have this narrative that Christopher Columbus just came in and was and immediately just started taking over them and wiping them out. In fact, I think I read on
no.
Vox that he wiped out 40 million
Oh,
natives, and I
oh,
was and let me see, what
oh,
was it?
oh my goodness.
Here, within 20 years, Columbus and his men killed nearly, I exaggerated, nearly 3 million natives, reducing the population from 3 million to 60,000.
Well, it was mainly the men. He certainly did not kill anybody. I'm quite sure of that.
Hmm.
I feel
And
very strongly about that. I mean, he really had a hard time managing all those men. They're the ones who went raping and murdering. There was absolutely no indication that Columbus ever had one of the women as a concubine, for instance. And I mean, a
mhm.
lot of the time he's off sailing, still trying to find the Grand Khan. He's not
Right.
always
Okay.
even there,
Hmm. That's a good
because he
point.
thinks he keeps thinking he's on the periphery of the Grand Khan. He just has to find him. And
Mm.
so he goes off sailing, looking for the Grand Khan several times, more than several probably. And so, the men are left there by themselves. And that's probably when they did the more horrible things. I don't know.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that because one accusation I hear often on popular sites, like just um, things like Adam ruins everything and those kind of little things like that, or like, oh, Columbus was actually just an idiot who thought he founded India and was actually discovered South America, and he didn't really discover anything because people were already there and people came
Right,
before him.
right.
And so, how would you respond to that?
First of all, nobody knew about the American continent in the way. So he assumed that he must be on the periphery of China.
Mm.
So he had to keep looking and looking. And yes, they at one of those little voyages they got to Panama and then couldn't go through. He was told that if you just cross over this land, there's water. But they were not about to get off the ship and go crossing land. And what would they do then anyway? So then he did not discover, but he hit the north coast of South America and discovered along the way that that's a huge area. And at that point, there was no way they could go around it. But he still didn't really know where he was.
Mm. Do you think he realized what he discovered by the time he died, or do you think he died not knowing the great discovery that he had made?
That's a good question. You would think, I mean, there must have been sailors and stuff going later. And I don't know. That's a very good question.
Hmm.
Whether he
Well,
ever knew that it was a whole new land. I should look
mhm.
that up a little bit. Maybe I don't say anything about that in the book.
I don't
I can't
remember.
remember.
I don't. If you did, I didn't get that
You
far.
haven't gotten there yet. And I don't
Unfortunately,
remember.
I wish I would have been able to finish all of it
um,
beforehand. But yes, it was very interesting, and yeah, I think that's very interesting. He because
yeah,
yeah,
I'll
the
have to
mhm,
look at the last chapter and see if I find anything in there. I
absolutely,
really can't remember. I'm sorry.
that's all
It's
right.
been such a while.
Absolutely. And so one of the other things that we come into like the modern times is they say that Columbus is a symbol of white supremacy. We see often of people who will tear down statues of
Oh,
Christopher Columbus. In Houston, we had the arm of Christopher Columbus was chopped off. And there's pictures of him being doused with red paint,
I know.
labeled as genocidal. And so, is he a symbol of white supremacy? And if not, like, why is this
I've not
accusation?
heard that ever. I mean, he liked the natives. I don't think he was saying that we're better than they or anything like that. The statue business is just driving me crazy. And I keep writing to all these places where they are, that these people know nothing about Columbus. They know nothing about him. And they're taking him as being a horrible person and, killing lots of people, that's not what he did. It was these horrible men. That's all I can keep saying. It was not, and it against all of his orders. The orders are written, so people should look at them, and I think I give the, in the bibliography and in the notes, where they are, all the orders. And from his writings, I respect him. I came to like him as a person. I thought he was, surrounded by these horrible men who kept going. He was one person against all these other men who thought the women belonged to them, and they were raping and murder. There's no indication whatsoever that Columbus ever did any of that stuff.
Do you think that that Columbus could have done more? Or do you think that he did the best he can? Because I think you mentioned that that the only people he ever killed were 2 people that were executed for abuses against the native people.
Yes.
So do you think that he should have done more, or do you think that he did the best he could given the circumstances?
Given the circumstances, I mean, some of those men could have come and killed him. He's one man against a whole bunch of them. And I think he had to sort of walk pretty carefully in that situation. But yes, he did hang 2 men who had been doing terrible, terrible things. And he thought that was not only an example for the natives to show that he was on their side, that if these people did bad things, he was going to punish them, but also, to show the men, don't do this, don't do this. They were furious when they saw the 2 men hanging. And I'm surprised they didn't do him in at that point, actually.
Yeah, it's quite amazing because we kind of have this modern mindset that capital punishment is evil. But back then, and even today in most places in the world, capital punishment is so necessary for the rule of law, especially in situations where there's not a established government and established police system. Without that, there's really no other way to keep order, especially when you're outnumbered, the way Christopher Columbus was.
Well, we still have capital punishment in a few instances.
Right, of course. In Texas, we have capital punishment here. So it's still around. It's just less palatable to most people.
Right.
And one of the things that I read from the Huffington Post was that he was very harsh in the way he punished the natives, and that he would chop off their hands for stealing and things like that.
I never heard anything about that.
Really, it's very interesting. I wonder where they get this information from, because you've read through all of the journals, and you've read through, I'm assuming, most of the writings, if not all of the writings about Columbus from that time. So where do you think they get these ideas that he was doing these kind of things?
I don't know. I mean, if anything, I would say it was the men who chopped off things. But I never read anything about him chopping off anybody's hands.
That's very interesting because, I see all these these accusations that just sound crazy on their face. But there's no way for me to just say, well, I mean, how am I supposed to say that that these are not true, because I haven't gone through and read through all of the accounts. But you were saying that you, being someone who has, are just like laughing at the accusations because of how ridiculous they are.
Well, there was stuff about when some of the natives were made into miners, to work at the mine. and there was they had to get so much gold, a certain amount of gold at different times. And I do recall that there was something about cutting off a finger, not a hand, but cutting off a finger. But whether that was Columbus or the men, at this point, I don't know. You'll come across it later in one of the chapters. But they were, put to work in the mines. And again, to reiterate, he kept saying, send over miners from Spain. He never wanted the natives to be working the mines, never. But they found the gold, and it was part of his whole mission, to get the gold to finance the crusade. So they were put to work. But probably there were some of those men put in charge who, kept very strict order and did bad things. I will have to read that part again.
Do you
come across it.
Do you happen to remember or know how Columbus got associated with the Franciscans?
He had, even in Genoa, way, way back, he was always partial to the Franciscans. And wherever he traveled, he always stayed with them. So, for instance, I think it's in Spain, La Rábida, the monastery. It's just where the ship, or is it Portugal? Wherever the ship on the first voyage left from, there's a big monastery there called La Rábida. And I've been there, and they have reserved Columbus's rooms and all the stuff that he had there.
Wow.
I had to visit all these places. I wanted to see Palos, where the ship left from, the first one, and they still have a replica of the ship there, and the fountain where he took water to put on the boat and everything. So, it was a really interesting journey for me as well.
That's
but he was always, I mean, there weren't hotels then, or I don't know whether there were or not, but he always stayed with Franciscans, and he became a Franciscan monk. Nobody knows that. He became, he's not in the monastery, but he became a lay Franciscan monk. And after the first voyage, after what had happened. And it is said that he wore the robes for the rest of his life. So imagine him, he's sailing on these ships in his robes, Franciscan robes. And Las Casas, who has been, heralded as the great person talking about the natives, he came over. He knew Columbus. He had good things to say about Columbus. And I think that may be where I read about the robes and everything. I'm not sure.
That's very interesting because the Franciscans, their habit is very distinctive. So it'd be very obvious that he was a Franciscan. It wasn't exactly a subtle thing. But the Franciscans, it really explains his love for the Franciscans, explains his love for Jerusalem. Because the Franciscans, starting with St. Francis himself, were given charge of being stewards of the Holy Land. So it really makes sense. They're the ones that created the whole idea of the Stations of the Cross that we have in Catholic churches all across the world today. Originated with the Franciscans. So
well, now I learned something from you. Thank you. I didn't know that. And Las Casas said that he could, do all the prayers, recite things just like a priest.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Yes, because the breviary, because I know the breviary today, the Liturgy of the Hours, every Franciscan or any monk or friar is required to say the Liturgy of the Hours. And back then, it would have been entirely in Latin, and you'd have to recite all 150 Psalms in Latin. And so that was a very arduous task.
And he did know Latin. Yeah, he did know Latin. So, wow. I'm learning things here, too. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Yes, the Franciscans are wonderful. I'm actually going off to become a Dominican friar in a few weeks, in a couple of weeks. So Francis and St. Dominic were contemporaries, and their order started at the same time.
So what's the difference between the two then?
The most obvious difference is the habits. The Dominicans wear a white habit, and the Franciscans typically wear brown habits.
Right.
But the charism is different as well. The Franciscans' charism is for the poor and for taking care of those who are needy, those who are sick. Where the Dominicans are more geared towards for the conversion of sinners, and so they're preachers.
Okay, got it. Well, that explains a lot about Columbus then, his concern for the people.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah,
immediately what I was thinking of whenever I found out that he was a third order Franciscan. I was like, well, that just makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
How his love for the native people, it's very much in the spirit of Saint Francis.
And I don't think he could have become that kind of a monk if they knew he'd been killing people, right?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So that is
No.
really a very important thing
Mhm.
too. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, because in the laws of the church at the time, and even today, though I think they're a little less strict now, is if you had ever killed someone, then you were not allowed to become join religious life, become a priest or become a friar.
Wow.
And so
Oh, I
it was
wish I
very
had known
strict.
some of this to put in the
Mhm.
book because that is very important. Yeah.
Yes, it's very
They
interesting.
wouldn't have let him become a monk if they knew that he'd been killing
Right,
people. Yeah.
absolutely. So it's very interesting. So I think those kind of things, like learning that he was a Franciscan alone, was just like it was mind blowing to me. And obviously, I mean, there are priests and monks who go off and do things they're not supposed to, but it definitely lends credibility to the defense of Columbus.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good
Mhm.
to know. That is
Um,
really good to know. Hmm.
and so one of the other accusations against him is that that he's forcing religion on the natives. Um, did you see this to be true that he was like forcing baptism upon people?
No, no, mm-mm,
Mm,
no. He was hoping. I mean, he thought they were natural Christians. He wanted priests to come and teach them
mm,
first, and then baptize them once they, learned what it was all about.
mhm.
And since they never sent any priests, that he didn't do anything like that. No.
And that just makes sense because, like we know that in the teachings of the church that you cannot baptize someone without their consent. So you can't
Right.
force baptism, otherwise it's invalid.
And they have to
And
know what it's all about. And that's why he
exactly.
wanted
Hmm.
the priests to come over and teach them. I
Hmm.
mean, it's in his writings. If people would just read his writings, they would see.
Hmm.
It's
And from the mindset of Columbus, like because I know from my mindset as a Catholic, I believe that the salvation of souls is the highest good, and so obviously I'd want people to come into the Catholic faith,
right,
and so too with Columbus, he would have wanted them to become Catholic in order that
right,
they would be saved. Hmm.
right. Exactly. That's what it was all about. Yeah. I mean, when he
Hmm.
found them and yeah,
And
and he wanted
finally,
them all to be taught and then baptized so that
mhm,
they would be saved.
mhm,
Baptized people also could not be enslaved.
mm. And that,
So,
yes, absolutely, because cannot enslave your brothers and sisters in Christ, right?
right,
So,
right,
um,
right.
so another thing they say is that he ended up dying a pauper in a Spanish prison. I've heard that from where did I hear that from? It was either Vox or it was the TV show Adam Ruins Everything. Um, and they said
I
that he
think
died a
so.
pauper in prison. Is there
No,
any truth to that at all?
I should read the final chapter of my book, but I don't think so. I can't
Mm.
remember where he did die.
I think I remember in your lecture, you mentioned that he had died um, with Franciscan friars with him, and his last words were, "Into your hands, Lord, I commend my spirit."
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Um,
But I can't remember where that was. Well, the other thing too in the book about he was, marooned for more than a year with his little son Ferdinand, or not little son at that point. Ferdinand had come over,
hmm,
and they were both marooned for a year, and so he was able to, have the natives feed them. I mean, he was not alone. I mean, there were other men with him, so somehow they were able to communicate, and the natives supported them and fed them, and they survived. And that was a whole year. Let's see.
okay, here I think I found where he says he died. It says Columbus followed the court when it moved to Valladolid. wherein he rented a building that is today a small museum called Casa de Colón. His condition was getting worse. The sand in his hourglass was running out. At age 56, he was dying with his most cherished goal unfulfilled, his legal cases inconclusive, and his deeds unrecognized and unrewarded. Friends and relatives, aware that his end was near, began to arrive at his bedside. His two sons were there, so too were Mendez and Fieschi, the two men who risked their lives to save him. His brother Diego was there, but Bartolome was away on their business. On May 19th, his will and his codicil was authorized. A priest was called and administered the last rites. Then, according to several witnesses' statements, on May 20th, 1506, the feast of the Ascension, Columbus, with his dying breath, said, "In manus tuas, Domine, commendo spiritum meum." Into thy hands, Lord, I commend my spirit.
Yep, that's on the last page. It's on 235 of the last chapter. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like he did end up dying unappreciated for many things, but it does not sound like he died in poverty and in prison.
Valladolid, I think, is a town either in Spain or in Italy. I'm forgetting where it is, but I could look it up quickly. But followed the court when it moved to Valladolid. It must be in Spain. It must be in Spain, I think.
And I think I have two more accusations against Columbus that I want you to comment on from Washington Post or the Huffington Post. My mistake. From the Huffington Post, they said that Columbus initiated the transatlantic slave trade, enslaving the Tainos or Tainos. Is that how you say it?
Taino. I think it's pronounced Taino, but
Tainos, telling his men he could take as many as they please. And Columbus said that the natives were full of love and without greed, and this meant they were easy to deceive and to take advantage of.
The Huffington Post is terrible. As far as I can see, lots of horrible things about Columbus have coming out from that. So wait a minute, what was the question?
I was curious to your comments on that accusation against him, that he started the transatlantic slave trade, and that he also noted that the innocence of the natives, and that was a easy way to take advantage of them.
He did notice how sweet and wonderful they were. The slave trade was mainly it was these horrible men who collected. I mean, when you read the book, what happened is they went marauding, they gather up all these natives and bring them in. And there was nothing he could do with, I mean, what's he going to do with all these, say there's a couple of hundred men, natives that these guys have collected. So yes, they did get sent back. That was not what he wanted. But they did get sent back. I mean, there is that. But again, I really think that's not at all what he wanted at all. It's these horrible men who kept collecting them against his orders, and the orders exist. So it was just, it was not meant to be a bad adventure. It was meant to be, much more benign, and it turned out to be not so.
And for the concluding with America today, we in America today, it's especially considering the history of Christopher Columbus and Columbus Day originating out of the oppression of the Italian Catholics in the New World. And so a lot of people don't know that the KKK also one of their major targets were Catholics, and so they were the first people to start fighting against Columbus Day and fighting against the Italian Catholics, and were lynching Italian Catholics.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a deep history of anti-Catholicism in America.
Yes, I know that part. And in Providence, the statue was also beheaded or broken into. And I've written to the governor saying, Columbus is not the guy that all these people are claiming he is. Oh, that's so sad. But I think it should go over to Federal Hill, which is the Italian neighborhood in Providence.
Mm.
And so I'm hoping that maybe the statue would be transferred over there. And I've also said that at any, excuse me, any of these statues, they should have a plaque explaining who he was, because he's not the person that everybody's claiming this genocide. Oh,
Yeah,
yes. I
it's
mean, there was a terrible, I guess you could call it genocide, but that was not what he had planned to do. It was not what he did. It's what these horrible men, against his orders, and those orders exist, and his writings talk about how horrible the men were. So it's, people need to read. People probably don't even realize that his writings still exist, some of them. And
do you
I keep saying, please read his writings, his
when
diary.
you write to the people of governors and things like that and mayors of cities, what do you tell them about Christopher Columbus? Like, I'm sure you don't just mail them your book. And
Well,
so
no,
what do you tell
but I
them?
tell them they should read it or get their library, or they should either read my book or read Columbus's diary. I said my book has lots of references, and I tell them that he's not the man that people are accusing him of being, and try to explain to them.
Have you ever gotten any people writing back to you, letting you know that they understand and they're gonna
No,
no?
no. I'm waiting to hear from the governor of Rhode Island. Maybe she'll, and also the mayor. I have contacted the mayor. When I write these letters, they're short letters. I think I sent one to you, just saying, I'll send one then, that he's not the man that people are thinking, that he became a monk. I include that in there, that his whole goal was to finance a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims before the end of the world. People don't even know that that was the motivation behind this. It was not to go rape and kill people. Nothing of the kind.
And I think most people would see even that as an evil thing as well. They would look at the Crusades and say, oh, well, that makes it even worse, that he's trying to finance the evil Crusades, and not understanding the historical context of the Crusades.
And of course it was the crusade to have the people in Europe go on the crusade, certainly not the Indians.
Right, of course. Right.
It was the people in Europe who were doing the crusades. Yeah, I agree. I mean, people can say what they want about the crusades, but a lot of people, can't accuse him for those. Those started before him. They were ongoing. And the whole notion within the Christian world that Jerusalem had to be in Christian hands. It was in Muslim hands. The other thing was, as I said, the fall of Constantinople, where there were lots of Genoese living. And so the trade route across Asia was also closed. The one that Marco Polo had done, that was closed for trade. So he had to go the other way.
Yeah. I think the reading about the story of the fall of Constantinople and just the opening chapter was worth buying the book just for that alone, because I was just blown away by the story. I was like, just seeing the amazing bravery of so many people, and then seeing the cowardice of other people. It just was absolutely stunning, and to see how that's directly what influenced the context that Columbus grew up in. It makes sense that you would want to fight for that kind of that situation, to fight for something that is part of your culture, your heritage, and not just the culture and heritage, but for a person. It's difficult to fight for a idea, but it's easier to fight for a person. And he was fighting for Christ, and so it really makes sense to see that in that context.
I think he did really think of himself as a Christ bearer. He wanted to bring Christianity so they'd be saved before the end of the world. And he really thought it was soon to come. I mean, it would not happen in his lifetime, but
I meant to ask you about, I remember in your prologue to the book, you had mentioned in your introduction, or your prologue, you mentioned that, it was your introduction, you had said that the cause for canonization was brought up in the 19th century for Christopher Columbus. Do you remember that information? Because I've seen that before in in an article by The Remnant, which is a really old Catholic newspaper. I think it's the oldest Catholic newspaper in English. And they talked about that the Columbus was his cause for canonization went up. And I was wondering if you knew anything else about that, because I was always trying to find a primary source for that or find more information about that, and I couldn't find anything else about it.
No, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to sort of search around and see if I can find anything. If I do, I'll let you know.
Please do. That I found that very interesting, because I had heard it once before, and then I would kind of dismissed it, and I would mention it to friends, but I didn't want to say it publicly because I could never find a source for it other than the one newspaper.
What page is that on?
It is on page 12 of your introduction. You said, no longer is Columbus the man who was proposed for canonization in the 19th century. Instead, an avaricious sinner and who fomented genocide. So I thought that was really interesting, and I was like, wow, I have to ask if you have a primary source for that or just more information about that, because I'd be very curious to see why his canonization process didn't go forward, and what was the ideas behind bringing his cause for canonization up. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
because he would definitely be
I will try and
Saint Christopher.
I wonder who that writer of the 16th century who thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened. Let me see that footnote for that. Oh, somebody named Sweet, Christopher Columbus and the Millennial Vision. And Sweet was, let's see, Leonard Sweet, yeah. Oh, it's in the Catholic Historical Review of 1986.
Okay, the Catholic Historical Review.
It's in it. You'll see it in the bibliography, but just look at that footnote, and it will tell you. Yes, and a note that's on page 12 in that introduction is also where I said I met Annunciata Colon, a direct descendant of Columbus, and I was admitted to the Casa de Alba, which is a private residence for another branch of his descendants. Oh yeah, and it had his drawing of the north coast of Hispaniola.
So finally, I think we'll just about conclude. I just wanted to ask about him becoming a saint. I think that's very interesting, because the whole process to becoming a saint, if his cause for canonization was brought up, which ended up, I'm curious to know why they ended up not picking it up, because when they pick it up, then they do a deep investigation of the entire life of the person. And they have, back then, it kind of changed the way they do it recently. In the last 40 years, they changed the way we do it. But back then, whenever his cause for canonization was brought up, they would have hired someone to be what they call a devil's advocate, and they would dig up all the dirt on Columbus and try to prove why he should not be a saint. And then they would argue it out.
That would be really interesting to find those documents if they exist.
Right. Yes, exactly.
There's your job, because I don't know about how to get a hold of those things. Do you read Latin?
I don't, unfortunately. I don't read it well enough to read anything like that, but hopefully I'll learn it.
Or you could find somebody, if you find a document of the place, you can get somebody to look at it. That would be really interesting. I mean, I didn't follow that up. I just wrote what I had read.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was wonderful talking to you. And
same here.
And I really enjoyed your book, and I highly recommend that anybody who wants to learn more about Columbus, learn about the life or just the situation they lived in, if you're just interested in the history of that time period, I would recommend picking up this book. It was an amazing read, and I can't wait to finish reading it. I wish I would have been able to finish reading it before we met. But I absolutely recommend this book to everyone. This is a wonderful read. So thank you very much for writing this book, and thank you very much for being an active defender for Christopher Columbus during this time of great unrest against Columbus. So thank you very much.
The whole thing is just terrible.
Well, thank you very much, and God bless, and hopefully
thank you.
We can have you come full over to our side, Christopher Columbus's side, all the way.
I don't think so. My other book is called Abraham on Trial, Social Legacy of Biblical Myth.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
thank you very much.
But yeah, I really came to, as I told somebody, I came to like Columbus as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, God bless, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
with that,
And be in touch.
Was out.
Be in touch. Let me know what you hear about, when people respond.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Carol Delaney with her book, Columbus and the Quest for Jerusalem. And so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, soapboxes, negativities, positivities, or anything in between, you can email me at fonsecaproduction@gmail.com. That's Fonseca, Fonseca production@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or concerns, soapboxes, negativities, positivities, or anything in between. So let me know if you have any of those things about Christopher Columbus. I'd be happy to ask her for you, or to find out the answers from her book and let you know the answers too. And if I get enough questions, maybe I'll do a follow-up episode, me doing Q&A on the things that we discussed. But with that, I think I will close out with an Ave as usual. And also, if you wouldn't mind praying for Dr. Carol Delaney. And so she has this great love for Christopher Columbus. And so hopefully she will be called to come into communion with the church. So pray for her as well. And maybe that's what we'll offer up this Hail Mary for. We'll offer it up for Dr. Carol Delaney, and we'll offer it up for America and their hatred against Christopher Columbus. So we'll offer it up for those intentions. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Qui letificat, o juventutem